Dear all participants, I am Upendra Pani over here, Director Institute of Media Studies, Bhubaneswar. Are you all getting me? So we are very happy to welcome you all to this third series of our webinar. Friends, we all are passing through a very pandemic situation everywhere, all over the world. Lockdown is there. So during this lockdown period, on behalf of Institute of Media Studies, Utkal University, with the aid and advice of some of our well-wishers, we started planning to organize a webinar. In the last April, we start our first series of webinar, and we got lot of feedback, which helped us and prompted us to go for the second series of the webinar. After getting the feedback, now we are planning for the third series of the webinar. We are very happy to welcome the advisor of this third series of the webinar, academic advisor, Professor Sunil Kant Behera, Professor of Eminence, Department of MCJ, Tezpur University. Sir is with us. So, on behalf of the webinar committee and Institute of Media Studies, Utkal University, I extend my heartfelt thanks to Sir, and he is the living spirit behind this third series of the webinar. We are very happy to welcome Professor Sunil Kant Behera to this webinar. I am very happy that our young friend, Dr. Syed Alfarid Hussain, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Mass Communication, Assam Central University in Silchar. Having 14 years of teaching and research experience, he had joined with us as the resource person in the first day of third series of the webinar. I welcome him to this seminar. Friends, as you all know, Dr. Syed Alfarid Hussain, a postgraduate in mass communication and journalism from Tezpur University. Dr. Hussain also has a master's degree in English literature from Delhi University. He did his PhD on media framing on interstate conflicts in Assam from Berhampur University, Odisha. Friends, as you all know, in our state, Odisha, we all consider Berhampur University is the mother of journalism and mass communication education. And we are very fortunate. Earlier, Dr. Behera had served his long career prior to joining in Tezpur University in Berhampur University. And number of scholars, he had produced number of scholars during his tenure. Alfarid Hussain also did his PhD under the supervision of Professor Sunil Kant Behera. His primary research interest is media framing, and is currently supervising doctoral research in the areas of social media and political communication and human-computer interaction development, that is HCI or D. In media literacy also he is working. And with these words, I welcome Dr. Alfarid Hussain to our webinar. Friends, I welcome you all, and we are very happy right now. Already 64 participants had joined this webinar. I welcome you all, and it's my proud privilege to welcome our advisor and our resource person, along with all the participants and the host of this webinar. Friends, keeping our request, Dr. Hussain will discuss on the fine-tuning academic writings, a relook at referencing and bibliography. This is a very important issue, the core area of mass communication and media education. Dr. Alfarid Hussain will speak on this. With these words, again I welcome you all, along with the resource person, our advisor, and my colleagues and friends to this webinar. Now I request Dr. Alfarid Hussain to continue his discussion. Dr. Alfarid Hussain.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Padhi, for this introduction, and I also thank you for inviting me for this series of webinars that you have organized. I also thank Professor Sunil Behra, my supervisor and my professor at Tezpur University, for giving me this opportunity. And I also thank Dr. Panda, who is also coordinating this presentation or webinar today. We start off our presentation today with this topic on fine-tuning your academic writing, a subject or a topic that I have felt necessary over the years of my experiences in my university, how students, they face some situations regarding this distinction between how an academic writing is distinctive from different types of writing. So we start off this presentation. It's a pretty longish presentation, but I'll try to finish it off within, say, 45 minutes or 35 minutes. My presentation is basically divided into two segments. The first part of the segment is, what constitutes academic writing, what are the different typologies of academic writing, what are the different characteristics of academic writing, and what are the different, particularly focusing on how to write, or what are the guidelines that one needs to keep in mind while writing a PhD thesis, and particularly a research journal article for a research journal. So without wasting too much of time, I'd like to start off today's this is I also have to give this caveat right at the beginning that most of the things that I'll be talking about are already familiar to you. I am assuming that I'm talking to a group of students who are at the master's and at their MPhil or at their PhD level, so that they can pick up some of the things that they might find relevant. Not all of them might be relevant for them. And that is one part. And the second part is on some of the newer, software that are available to help you in your academic writing, particularly referencing software as well as bibliographic citation and indexing software that are available in present day to help you in your academic writing. So I start off my presentation now So we start off because since there is paucity of time, and I know it will be quite impossible to include everything that is part of what we understand as academic writing. So we start off by this fundamental idea that reading is the most important part of writing, something that was, said to a bunch of students by a professor a long time back when he entered the class on a similar class like academic writing, and he asked the students, in your 25 years of life, how many books have you read in your entire life, cover to cover? Have you read 100 books in your life? None of these students could, raise their hands. And then he reduced the benchmark and he said, have you read 50 books in your life? Even then, only a handful of students, raise their hands. So the idea behind academic writing is that writing comes from reading, and reading will lead you to critical reading, will lead you to critical reflection, critical, thinking, and this critical thinking will translate itself into critical writing. That is one of the fundamental, aspect of what we understand as critical writing or academic writing. Now we go into understanding, just touching upon what academic writing is not, because this is something a peculiar situation we face most often in the academic departments when students come to pursue higher research courses. The idea is that academic writing is not journalistic writing. Academic writing is not fiction, storytelling, story writing, or literary, or it is not a demonstration of your literary flair or your imaginative prowess. And then we also tend to say, but this is again a contested idea, that academic writing is sometimes not even about personal diary. Now, this is something that has undergone change because of the research paradigms that have come about in recent years, particularly in the form of subjectivist and interpretivist, research rather than the positivist research that social science normally used to rely on till recent time. And that is why I put a question mark in the last two points here, whether it can be academic writing can be subjective in nature, whether it can be opinionated, whether it can be, express, espouse your preference of the researcher, and whether the value system or the worldview or the, subjective, biases of the researcher also spill over into the academic writing. So before we go further, let us look at all the different, typologies or types of, different, academic writing that we engage it at some point in our academic life, right from our school, college, university to, research and MPhil and PhD levels. So academic writing are any term paper that you might have written, or the master's dissertation that you must have done, or MPhil PhD thesis, or a book or a monograph or conference proceedings, or research articles that you wish to publish or you've published in academic journals, review papers, and research project proposals that we often, confront in our academic life when we write for research project grants from organizations like ICSSR or UGC or UNICEF or other funding agencies. And then this whole types of papers like conceptual paper, occasional paper, policy paper, and working paper. These are all different types of, academic writing that we at some point in our life, sooner or later, we will be engaging in any or all of these activities or enterprises. So what is this thing about academic writing that distinguishes it from, other types of writing? It is, we just need to understand that it is formal in nature. It has its own, idioms and critical idioms. It has its own forms of expressions. It comes with its own, vocabulary, and it is technical in nature, and it tries to foreground, arguments, and it is objective depending on the type of research that you engage in. It is objective. Some people, find it analytical. It is persuasive in nature, and it is structured and organized in a particular format. So these are, some of the characteristics that define or underline what we normally understand as academic writing. One of the things that some people, often find confusing is what should be the form of the address while writing an academic research paper or a thesis, whether it should be a third person singular or whether it should be a first person narrative. So this is also something that is contestable. Most of the quantitative and, positivist research are written in third person because it comes from the positivist, legacy from the physical sciences that social sciences have, adopted. And then we have this interpretative, subjectivist and constructivist and, pragmatist, paradigms of research where particularly in ethnography or, types of research, ethnography or phenomenological studies or, grounded theory, where the researcher might possibly or perhaps engage in a first person I also. So basically it documents and communicates the research process and the research outcomes, and it also communicates systematically obtained knowledge in a systematic order. So then I come to this, research onion that Saunders and others have developed in 2007. It talks about the different layers that constitute, because even for engaging in the last part of this research process, which is the writing part, we need to understand the research part in order to engage in the writing part. For example, the research onion that Saunders and others talks about is constituting of these 6 layers. The first layer being I come to the next slide. The first layer being the research philosophy, whether you need to determine, you need to, clarify, you need to confirm whether your research will fit into the positivist tradition or the realist tradition or the interpretivist tradition or the pragmatist tradition. after you have determined whether it's going to be an empirical study or a scientific study or an evidence-based study or a quantitative study, then or maybe a mixed method research that is part of pragmatist theory, or interpretive studies, then we come to the next layer of this research onion, whether the approach that you will adopt or employ to carry out your research, whether it is going to be an inductive approach, particularly used in the case of qualitative research, or particularly for building up new theories, or to build up new theories as part of your outcome of a particular research exercise, or a deductive approach, whether you are testing existing theories that already exist, and you are testing the efficacy of a theory in a particular socio-political economic context. Or it may also be an abductive approach, where it will be a combination of both inductive approach as well as the deductive approach. For example, you may start off with a open mind, and then you go on, you start off with testing a theory, and at the end of your research you end up creating or developing a new theory. That part is called the abductive approach. And then the third layer of that research onion talks about the methodological choices that we have to undertake while carrying out the research, whether it's going to be a quantitative method, or whether it's going to be a multiple quantitative method, or multi-method quantitative methods, or mixed method research, or qualitative methods. These are some of the choices that you have to clarify right in the beginning of your research, or through the process of your research journey, so that you come up with logical, organic, coherent, structured and result-oriented, findings or outcome. And then after we decided on the methodological choices, we come to adopt or engage or employ the appropriate and the necessary, methods that are part of that methodology, whether it's going to be from the positivist tradition, philosophy, or whether it's going to be from the interpretivist theory paradigm, or whether it's going to be a mixed method strategy that comes research philosophy. After we have decided whether it's going to be a mix of quantitative or qualitative, or only qualitative, or maybe multiple types of qualitative, maybe phenomenological plus or a case study, or action research, for example. These are types of qualitative, mostly qualitative research. And then we have things like survey, or experimental research and structured interview. These are some of the methods from the quantitative paradigm. And then for time horizon, either it is longitudinal in nature, over periods of time, decadal studies, or things like a long period of time, or it can be based or situated or located in a particular time and space, and that study would be called a cross-sectional study. And then we come to the the inner core, the core of the research onion, that is basically the techniques and procedures that you need to adopt to carry out your research activity. For example, the data collection, the instruments, the data collection tools, or the scales, or the adequate scales that you need to employ to carry out your particular study. Then this is very basic in nature. I just need to throw it up on, because I do not know who all are watching this particular presentation today. I think maybe because all these are part of the confusions that students come up to us and ask, what should be the typical length of a PhD thesis? What should be the word limit of a PhD thesis? So in this SAGE, compendium of how to write your PhD thesis, it says about 50,000 to 80,000 words. Normally, this is the range that you have to factor in while preparing your PhD thesis. So what is the typical structure of a PhD thesis? It starts with drawing up a working title. Now the title the title itself is a very critical engagement. You need to be careful about the use of each and every term that is part of your title. For example, a title is reflective of the 4 different paradigms or philosophies that make up research. For example, it can have the ontological part, it can have the epistemological aspect, it can also have the methodological aspect as well as the axiological component. For example, if I say somebody's done a study on media framing of conflict in Northeast India, for example, a content analysis of national and regional press. If that is the title, then you can clearly see that there is the reality that exists, that is the conflict, the conceptual framework that exists in the title, which is the conflict, and the media framing. It is a theoretical component. It is this particular lens or the prism through which we will be addressing or confronting this issue of conflict coverage in Northeast India. So epistemological aspect is also reflected in the title. So one needs to be careful. For example, if you say a content analysis of a particular press, then that content analysis becomes the methodological aspect. So a good title, I feel, as I may be wrong, but I feel it can be a combination of all these, 3 different or 4 different, because axiological also is important because it talks about the values and the ethical dimensions of doing a particular research. For example, what is the rationale behind doing this particular research? What is the aim of this particular research? That is also in the title itself. Title is very important. Then comes the ancillary documents, the certificates, and other abstract is an important component of where you provide the overall important factor aspects of your research in a brief concise, so that even if evaluators have to look through your thesis, they can have a good all-around idea about the work in the through the abstract itself. So basically in social science research, it may be different for, say, physical sciences or natural sciences or biological sciences or from the arts and humanities, but in social sciences normally, and it also depends on university systems or the style book that is followed by individual universities or institutions, but by and large, a PhD thesis has these following, chapterizations. For example, introduction, review of literature, very important, and then methodology, and then comes the data analysis, data interpretation, and then summary of findings, conclusion, discussion, recommendation. And these are, it also ends at the end of the thesis. You can have references and bibliography, annexure, and appendix. So when we come to a PhD thesis, some people have this problem about what should be included in the introduction chapter. For example, you can state, the introduction will state the problem. The problem is the title of your research. That is the research problem. And the research problem, it starts either with a statement of the problem, or you may start off by giving a background of the study, and then you may also include these two concepts called theoretical framework and the conceptual framework. Now these, some people tend to use them interchangeably. Sometimes people use them as the 2 sides of the same coin, but there are fundamental difference between conceptual and theoretical framework, because it has to deal with the research approach that you have adopted. For example, if it is an inductive research, then it will be a conceptual framework. And if it's a deductive research, then it will be a theoretical framework. And then we also have to include some other aspects like the purpose, aims and objectives of the study, and then operational definitions, which are important to that particular research work, and the procedure, the methodology in a brief manner, and then rationale of the study. That is the axiological part of your research philosophy, then significance of the study, if limitations of the study, if there are any, and then the organization of the study, for example, the chapterization. Then we come to the review of literature. Review of literature is one of the most important, activity that one can engage in the pre-writing phase. Because if you look at academic writing, just like in television production, we talk about the 3 stages of production. The same formula applies for academic writing also. For example, we have a pre-writing phase, writing phase, and then a post-writing phase. In the pre-writing phase, you do your mind mapping and you do your blueprint, you do a lot of brainstorming, you try to find out, the critical aspects of the work that you need to, you are engaged in currently. What are the different, theoretical, underpinnings that, influence the particular research problem that you are engaged in right now. All these activities will be part of what we understand as the review of literature. Before you actually engage, the review of literature helps you to frame your theoretical framework or even your conceptual framework. So while writing a literature review in the second chapter, we can subdivide the ROL, review of literature, into three parts. The first part can be a review of literature of all the earlier works of earlier, scholars and researchers who have done work on the theoretical aspect of that particular research problem that you are engaging with at the present time. Or it may be review of literature of the concepts that will be influencing your work. And the second part of the review of literature can be the review of literature to understand the different methodological approaches that were adopted by scholars who have done similar studies in different socio geographical context. So one can be the ROL of theoretical frame, the other can be the ROL of the methodological approaches, and then you come to talk about the gaps or the the lack that exists in the existing literature in this particular problem. For example, you identify the research gap. It may be either in the form of the conceptual theoretical framework, or it can be also in the form of the methodological approaches. After you have arranged the review of literature in this format, and then you can, at the end of your research review of literature, you can talk about formulating the research hypothesis or the research questions that will be informed by the review or the literature survey that you have undertaken. For example, one major problem that students often encounter in this particular chapter is they tend to either include everything that that comes across to them, and they will simply fill up pages and pages of review of literature, whether it has any bearing, whether it has any logical connection with the research questions or the aims of your particular study. That is also to be avoided. And at the same time, the other end of the spectrum also consists of people who come up and say my study doesn't have any review of, I could not review any literature because there exists none. And this is also a very tricky situation. Either there is no literature or there is too much of literature. So one needs to find a balance between how many references you make in your literature review, because at the end of the day, what should be foregrounded is your own voice, the voice of the researcher, and it should not be overtaken or subsumed by too much of literature review of works done earlier, that so as to drown your voice, and your voice is totally overtaken by the research quotations and extracts that you have included as part of your literature review. So the ROL is an important chapter. So in the method, then comes the methodology, bearing on the review of literature, the previous chapter. These are some of the components that can possibly be part of a methodology chapter. Methodology deals with different methods. It can be one method, it can be multiple method, it can be mixed methods. And then you need to, clearly state the aim and objectives. These are two different things. Aim of the study and objectives of the study. These are some of the things that we need to clarify before we engage in the academic writing exercise. And then the research design will be part of the methodology, because methodology will only talk about the methods, but the research design will comprehensively talk about the sample, the sampling size, the sample size, the sampling selection criteria, the sampling selection techniques, and the population, the sample, and the data collection, instruments that you will be employing, and then also talk about the reliability and the validity of the research instruments or research tools that you will be engaging in this particular research. And then comes the fourth chapter, particularly in social science research, that is the data analysis. These nomenclature may be different for different people. It is not a one size fits all kind of a formula that we employ in writing research thesis, but generally it is a word that is reflective of the essence of what this topic actually deals with. It is basically analysis of the data that you have processed, and that processing can take place either through use of computational statistics or other methods, and then you lay them out in a table. And this is basically the most original part of your exercise, because this will lead to the outcomes that your research will finally evince at the end, and whether that outcome is has the quality of generalizability or not. So this is very important in the sense that the use of statistics and the use of statistically measured or tested data, this particular part of the analysis of a chapter is important to a lot of people, because a lot of people are unfamiliar with the terrain of use of statistics in social science research. So there is every possibility that we might use inappropriate statistical test or inappropriate data that might result in errors, and that might result in insignificant or meaningless findings. So one needs to be wary and careful of that, and one also needs to be careful informed of this small thing, but these are confusions raised by students. Not all scales that we used in processing of the data analysis are Likert scales. There are other scales that we have appropriated from psychology, or particularly psychology, social psychology. So one needs to be aware of or familiar with some other scales, like Rosenberg's self-esteem scale, or Ed Diner's life satisfaction scales. These are some of the different things that one can be familiar with before engaging in the writing. Summarization, whether you have answered the research questions that you have formulated at the review of literature, whether it has the element of generalizability, the outcomes of your study, and whether they have been presented in a clear, concise, visual format, so that it makes things easier for people to understand. And then the conclusion, that is the last final chapter of this research thesis. That is where we discuss findings, existing, the policy implications, limitations, the challenges, and recommend or prescribe an action plan. So this will vary from study to study. What is the particular study that you have adopted, that will be determined. So basically, after understanding these, the format and the structure, because academic writing, or particularly a thesis, it has two components. The first component is the content, and the second component is the form. The form is the presentation, how it is presented, how it is structured, how it is laid out, how it is organized, how it is presented. So one needs to pay particular attention that a clear title and abstract reflect the nature of the study, and then a structure and format which helps the reader to absorb the subject, and intellectual coherence. This is important, which starts with precise aims from which the research design and a clear conclusion. And then accuracy, one needs to pay particular attention to grammar and punctuation, because one of the most off-putting things about a thesis which is up for submission is that when you notice, spelling errors and grammatical errors and punctuation and utilization and use of foreign words and sloppy. So it is reflective of a sloppy and very amateurish kind of presentation that is unbecoming and almost unacceptable at this particular level. And then some of the confusions that people normally have, some I have already discussed. These are some of the, based on my own experiences, these are some of the most common confusions people have who are engaged in their MPhil or even in their master's dissertation or at the PhD level. They have confusions related to concepts like ontology, epistemology, axiology, and methodology. Then there is this confusion between conceptual framework and theoretical framework, statement of the problem and background of the study, if aim of the study and objectives of the study are one and the same, if research questions and hypotheses are one and the same, or if we can use either or one of these elements, or if we can use both of these elements. And then if there is confusion between methods and methodology, research design, and the difference, there is confusion among people between multi-method and mixed method research, questionnaire, interview schedule, data analysis, interpretation, because relating to interpretation, people have a tendency to concentrate all their efforts and energy into the data analysis. And as a result, the interpretation, your original intervention into your argument data that you have processed doesn't get reflected. That is a fundamental flaw that exists, because data interpretation is given the short shrift, and it is sometimes ignored, and very minuscule part of the entire data analysis and interpretation chapter is actually devoted to the interpretation, which should not be the case. And then we have this small minor confusion between population and sample, in-text citation and out-text citation, reference and bibliography, footnotes and endnotes, and annexures. These are some major common confusions people face. Similarly, I will just skim through this, because I thought it would benefit some of our students, because they also ask how should we write a research paper. So research paper is also a part and extension of your research work that you have already undertaken. So a lot of it will be already carried forward, but we need to keep it concise. The word limit will be again determined by different journals and their specifications and their stipulations. But this is overall the structure that one can keep in mind. It starts with the abstract, a brief abstract of 250 to 500 words, some keywords that will help you in search, and then introduction. The methods have to be clearly spelled out, and then the results have to be explained and elaborated upon, and then finally it ends with a discussion. So, and particularly we engage in this APA style of referencing, because there are different referencing styles. We normally include the APA style of referencing. So one of the, now I come to this one very important and crucial aspect of academic writing, that is the scourge of, the very disturbing or very, depressing and very, unethical or, challenge to academic integrity, which we call, which is plagiarism. So plagiarism, as we all know, is the wrongful appropriation and stealing and not citing the sources that you have used in your work, and then passing them off as your own original thoughts and ideas. That is reflective of what we call academic dishonesty, and at the worst end of the spectrum it can also be constituted misconduct. and almost criminal in nature, and it is unethical practice. And it is also when people do not spend enough time in critical reflection, critical thinking, critical writing, and lazy. So it is reflective of that lack of academic rigor that translates into a quick fix kind of a solution, which is basically to engage in plagiarism. So some of the but one needs to pay attention to what are the different forms of plagiarism that sometimes we might even unintentionally be engaged in. For example, submitting someone's work as your own is the most blatant form, and then taking passages from your own previous work might also be construed as, without adding citations, may also be construed as plagiarism. And then rewriting someone's work without properly citing sources and using quotations but not citing the source. These are things that we often overlook, or we tend to not pay enough attention. So but these are the things that will finally eventually be lead to some sort of roadblock in your academic progress. Citing some but not all passages should also melding together cited and uncited sections, and providing proper citations but fails to change the structure and wordings, and inaccurately citing. You have engaged in citing, but you have inaccurately cited. That also might also be possibly considered as plagiarism, and relying too heavily on other people's work and fails to bring original thought into the text. So how can one possibly avoid plagiarism? One most smart and most easy way is to use quotes and or maybe paraphrase the portions that you have taken from other works, and maybe use and also sometimes summarize the principal ideas that emanate from that work that you have just read. So for longer quotes, indent the entire passage. It can be indented in a passage, and if you have table, chart, diagrams, cite the source directly. Statement directly below. Permission has been obtained in terms of figures and in terms of illustration. When you use maps, you just need to clearly mention the source or any data that you have used in your work. It needs to be clearly sourced. The source has to be clearly mentioned right next to the text or the image. So we can engage, we can take any or all of these things right to the end if we have at all some time to engage in a Q&A, but let me just go through to come to this citation, referencing, and bibliography. Citation is the way that you tell your readers that certain material in your work has come from another source. It is not a question mark on your academic credentials if you cite people in your academic exercise, academic activity. It is a common practice in academic writing to take material, take knowledge from other people's and use them, but it should be used in such a way that you pay proper acknowledgement to the sources from where you have included this information. So that is the in-text citation. In-text citation is basically including within a bracket, you just mention the name, the surname of the author, and the year of publication of the book. And if it is a direct quotation that you are using in your work, then it will also include the page number of that itself. So that the sources that you have cited in your text, those sources are known as in-text citation. And in order to know more about the in-text citation, we refer to the section at the end of your work, which is called the reference section. the reference section will have additional information about the name of the journal or the book or the publication from where this particular idea you have taken, the year of publication, the publisher, and as well as the names of the authors. And bibliography is a list. Bibliography will also include the materials or sources that might not have been possibly included in your text, but somehow you have consulted or engaged in at some point in your research journey, and that sources can also be included as part of what we call the bibliography at the end of your research work. So for citation and referencing style, we have different depending on the streams of our disciplines, for example, arts and humanities and social sciences and medical sciences. So we have these different styles of citation and referencing. The most commonly used referencing style in social science research is the seventh generation APA style, and other styles are MLA, AMA, Chicago, Harvard, Vancouver. These are some of the other references. So depending on the style, the format, the arrangement of the citation, the arrangement of the referencing will be marginally different from each other. So after addressing this thing, we come to this idea called citation indexing databases. Now, in recent years, we have found that particularly in the university system, there are these big worldwide worldwide databases that contain all the different citation indexes or bibliography or abstracts of papers that have been published in peer-reviewed journals, and they are mostly licensed by the university on a subscription basis. So some of the major citation indexing databases that we can take help of with our institutional affiliation are Scopus, and now Scopus is part of a publication house called Elsevier. And then another indexing citation database is Web of Science. Web of Science has indexing of different science journals as well as social science journals. So for social science, we have a separate citation index. We call it the Social Science Citation Index. And then you might be familiar with Google Scholar. That is also another indexing citation indexing database. And we have the Indian Citation Index. It is a repository of around, I think, I may not be correct, but it is a repository of about 1100 journals, I think, from India, which is part of that database. So if we need to, scale up and you need to, play the big game, then it is absolutely mandatory for students to take, membership or, be part of such kind of index. Academic networking, social networking, academic websites like Academia Edu, and then, ResearchGate or ORCID, or, Vidwan is another, I think, from the library science, or in FlipNet. These are some of the, repositories that one can, consult. It will be very beneficial for their academic writing exercise. And then nowadays, particularly in the last few years, we have all specific reference management software that are available, which helps you in arranging and ordering your reference and citation and bibliography in the proper order. For instance, few years back, some people used to manually, write down the reference section, and that used to be a very tedious activity, and it was not very scientific also. But now we have such, reference management software like Mendeley, and EndNote Basic, Zotero, RefWorks, or CiteYouLike, or BibTeX. These are some such, online reference management, software that helps you automatically or, clearly, at the click of a mouse, it helps you to, minimize the time that you require to do up your referencing and citation and bibliography, and as well as, even in the while you are engaged in writing a research paper. So particularly I wish to speak about Mendeley because it is a user-friendly reference manager. It is online as well as offline, and online it has access to over over 6 million researchers worldwide. So you can create a folder by installing the Mendeley software in your system, and then in that folder you can just write. You just need to have an internet connection. You would just write the keywords of your research area, and then all available, resources that is part of the Scopus and Elsevier database. They will be available to you, and you can sift through these resources and then select and filter them out and finally engage in your own writing. So it actually facilitates your writing a paper or even in your thesis, and then it manages your research and it showcases your work, and it beneficial for researchers and scholars. So, and then one other aspect of such research, citation referencing, software or is that today we have these systems where you can, measure empirically, in a way, systematically measure your academic, prowess. For example, we have this index called the H index. It was developed by this physicist, I think, from US, Jorge Hirsch. So it goes on his name, H index. So H index is a measure of your academic prowess as well as your citation impact. For very simply, it is basically an measure to H index is a measure of the citation impact of your papers that you have written, and they are stored in Scopus Index journals or Web of Science Index, databases, or a Google Scholar Index databases. For instance, it is to measure the citation impact. For instance, if you have written a paper and it has been cited, say 10 times, and another paper you have written and it has been cited 5 times. So depending on the number of papers, for instance, 2 papers are in a Scopus database, and both the papers have been cited twice by different researchers, then your H index becomes 2. For similarly, it is said that if the index is say 10, H index is 10 for a scholar or an academician, it is a very good indication of the academic caliber of that, because he has been cited, and most of his papers have been cited by people all over the world. So it is often assumed or considered that with 10 or more citations, your work is in the top 24% of the most cited articles worldwide. And then how you can, of course, there were other, indexes, but I will not go into them. I-10 is an index to measure in Google Scholar, so number of publications. So if you have 10, if a paper has been cited 10 times, then you have an I-10 index of 1. So that is a measure of your academic and the impact of your academic paper. So how now I finally come, this is the end of my presentation. How techniques to improve your H index is to identify those journals which are present in these 2 or 3 citation databases. For example, Web of Science, and then Elsevier, Web of Science, and Scopus and Google Scholar. If you have identified the journals that are included in these 3 citation databases, then the chances of improving your H index multiplies. So, and then one also needs to understand that the more you cite, the more you will also be cited. And one of the other ways is to self-cite in your paper. That is also one of the smart techniques of improving our H index. And then one other way is to write, a paper or an academic article with a frequently cited expert. That also increases your chances of improving your H index. And then one also has to pay attention to writing your name properly, because the spelling and the names, for example, Alfarid Hussain, Syed Alfarid Hussain, Syed A Hussain, all these will lead to different, permutation combinations and ultimately confusion. So one needs to maintain the same standard name in all your research papers. So see that all your are also available online. So finally, some important pointers, because I realize that there are too many things to discuss, not enough time. So one needs to have go through the UGC care list to understand what are the journals that are part of the UGC care list. One needs to pay particular attention to review peer-reviewed journals, Scopus Index journals, Web of Science Index journal. Then, journal impact factor. This is another thing that you need to pay a little attention. Journal citation reports, Shod Ganga, InflibNet. These are Indian, institutions that have been built up to serve as repositories. JSTOR is another digital library that you can get. So finally, with this, I end my talk on this, which I hope was a generic overview of some of the aspects that one can pay attention to. I do not know how much it helped the people who attended this presentation today, but we can always, but it was not very comprehensive, but just touch and go kind of address. But these are all emanating from things that normally come from students at different levels of their research engagement. So thank you, sir, Professor Padhi. Can we have time for question answer for the?
Thank you, Dr. Alfred Hussain, for your the discussion. You have already covered all the aspects of the research methodology, starting from the concept to the objectives and many more things. And I hope your whole discussion and the PowerPoint presentation will be really helpful to all of our participants. Now we'll go for our question and answer session. So I request all the participants, since we have very short time in our hand and shortly we will join in our next session. So I will request the participants to be very pinpoint. Just one-line questions they can put. I request our host to unmute Professor Sunil Kant Behra, who is also with us from the beginning. So I request Professor Behra to have an overlook of the whole of the discussion.
It was a wonderful presentation.
Yes,
basically, it was a very structured presentation on how to conduct research and how to also write the thesis.
The video is not coming.
Particularly, it was very important for the scholars and teachers, even for me, to have a structural learning on citations, referencing, and what is plagiarism, what is not, and also bibliography. And I thank Alfarid for clearing doubts in the minds of the research and teachers while pursuing their research, whether it is ontological, epistemological, or axiological, and whether it is theoretical foundation or he has clarified. I am really happy that this lecture will certainly help our young faculties and scholars to pursue research in the proper sequential format. And referencing, as we all know, is very, very important for academic writings and research writings. So there are a lot of clarity he has brought in through his lecture, and I thank Alfarid for that. Now, I will not take much time, and I am happy as a teacher of Alfarid that he has performed so nicely, and I am sure all the lectures that we have lined up for the next 9 days will be of this quality or maybe of higher quality. So I thank Alfarid, and now I leave it to other participants to ask any questions for clarification.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your feedback and analysis. So now it is the time, Mr. L.B. Ujha. What is the question you can put in one line? Mr. L.B. Ujha, please.
Sir, just you in your first slides, you have introduced inductive, deductive, and abductive. Inductive, deductive, and abductive.
Yes.
Can you clarify the abductive thing a little more with some examples? Okay. Thank you.
Abductive is part of the pragmatist, philosophy of research, where we engage in mixed method kind of methodological approaches. For example, we include quantitative as well as quantitative, methods to carry out. Because I remember yesterday, Professor Vinod Pavarala was talking about the intangible in participatory research. How do we catch hold of the intangible? So there are several, situations where some of the things get lost out in translation, particularly some aspects like emotion, some aspects like empathy, some aspects like, love, for instance. So these are qualitative, factors or variables that when they are quantified into metrics and numbers and, values, it might not be truly reflective of the nuances of that particular factor. So in such kind of pragmatist paradigm of research, we sometimes, the approach that is adopted is abductive in nature. For example, you may start off with a deductive approach. For instance, you will start off by testing a theory. For example, a particular theoretical framework you have already included as part of your research design. And then as you go along, you from that, in grounded theory also, from the ground, from the data that comes from the ground, you realize that it is leading to the formulation of a new theory. So in this situation, what you are basically engaging in is both inductive as well as deductive approach. And that particular mixing is, as I understand, that mixing is called the abductive approach. For instance, there is a deductive element to it. You start off with a theoretical prism, but then you end up creating a new theoretical formulation depending on the changing circumstances of the site or the location or the situation in which your research is located. So that is basically, if you have understood or whether I've been able to.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
For you to understand.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This
Thank
is all
you.
I have
Thank
to
you.
say on.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
okay. Anybody else? Will take only one question since we are running short of time. Please, we'll allow only one question. Anybody else?
Yes, I want to ask one question.
Okay.
Hello.
Rajneesh. Yeah, Rajneesh.
Hello,
Yes,
Alfarid,
yes.
sir. Namaskar, sir. Namaskar, your old student.
Yeah.
Sir, can you please explain in few lines about grounded theory? Grounded theory.
Yeah.
First, my first question.
Right.
The second thing is that, sir, please explain what we have to do in those cases if we are doing new form of research. Then how we have to frame the conceptual framework or theoretical framework. Sometimes it's really difficult for us to find the theory.
Okay. So grounded theory is part of the interpretivist paradigm or subjectivist paradigm, where it is qualitative in nature. Okay, qualitative in nature. The other aspect of grounded theory is that it is based purely on the data that comes from the ground. So theoretical framework is not quite applicable. As far as I understand, it is not quite applicable, because from the data that will come out from the ground as part of a sort of, say, ethnographic study or participant observation method, and then you go on digging and you sort of engage in some sort of an ethnography, and you come up with certain findings that may lead to the formulation of a new theory. So that formulation of a new theory that is based on the data that has come from the ground on the basis of a participant observation method or an ethnographic exercise, or there are other qualitative so that will lead to the formulation of a theory. The theory that emerges from the ground is called the grounded theory, because it is not influenced by any theoretical framework. To be engaging in grounded theory, one needs to have a qualitative approach, and one needs to have a interpretivist or a subjectivist approach of engaging in either mixed method research techniques, or qualitative, other single qualitative methods like unstructured interview or ethnography. Rajneesh, could you get a sense of what I want to say?
Yeah, I got your point, sir. I got.
So many thanks, friends and the participants. Now we have where they reached the point to wind up the past session. But my request to all the participants to remain join with us. Don't leave the session. Very shortly, the next speaker will join with us. So we are very thankful and grateful to Dr. Alfarid Hussain for his nice presentation and discussion. And the objectives of the third webinar series, whatever we have kept, and we all hope that Dr. Alfarid Hussain had made all these requirements, and really his discussion will be helpful to all of our participants, as told by Dr. Sunil Bakant Behra. Really it is very helpful to all of our young media educators and research scholars, and particularly the students, those who are pursuing and continuing this media education. So with these words, again, I extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Alfarid Hussain for his nice presentation. We also seek the same support and the cooperation from you in our future endeavor. As I request Dr. Alfarid Hussain in the morning today, that you will be the opening batsman in our third series of webinar, and his score, I do not know, the participants will tell how many runs he has scored as the first batsman. And but from my side, I can say, yes, you have done a very excellent things. Thank you. All participants and friends, I welcome you all again to the second session of this webinar series. And as you all know, Assistant Professor Alankar Kaushik had joined with us as the resource person in this second session of the webinar. And Alankar Kaushik is an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at the English and Foreign Language University Shillong campus. He has been teaching communication and social change for the last 10 years. His research interests involve the areas of children and media and community media. He has been practicing community media for social change by working on various projects with UNICEF on participatory media since 2012, and helping children from the economically disadvantaged sections of the society build the skills required to report their issues by using various communication tools, and to become responsible local reporters by developing them. And he will today focus on the online media, youth and democracy. Mr. Kaushik will continue his discussion. With these words, I welcome Mr. Alankar Kaushik to continue his discussion.
Thank you very much for joining in today's session. As Professor Pari just pointed out that Alfarid was a striker today in the cricket match, so I'm the non-striker. So once the first over is over, so I'm there to bat now for another hour. I shall try to keep my presentation within 35 to 40 minutes, and then definitely love to hear from you, your comments or any kind of interaction that if you wish to have after my presentation. So the topic that I have planned to speak on is on online media, youth and democracy. This topic I have chosen because I've been working with adolescents, youth since few years, both at the level of teaching the students in the academic circle, and also practicing it to enhance the skills of some children to be the young reporters. And that's how I'm trying to build my argument here on the whole idea of the online media, youth, and democracy. So before I start, I just want to make it very clear that by the online media, by the term online media, I mean here the whole digital range of digital platforms that are available, including the social media platforms. By the term youth, I am trying to make you understand about the whole issues of adolescence and youth and the emerging adults, maybe at a range of say 20 years to 30 years, the youth of India, where the India is proud to be a very young demography. And by the whole term democracy, I mean the sense of representation, participation, participatory democracy, and so on and so forth. So while I was preparing for this presentation, one of the important, I'll just, Nishiji, I'll just launch my PowerPoint. Okay, is that fine? Is it visible, Nishiji? Okay, so while I was presenting, while I was preparing for this presentation, a couple of pictures that have came to my mind, which I wanted to share with you all is a beautiful picture of a animated picture of a girl holding the placard of the present environmental issue happening in the Northeast in Assam about the coal mining issue, which is the Dihing Patkai, which is located in Dibrugarh Tinsukia area, which is one of the most important largest stretch of tropical lowland rainforest in the country. You can also see these images in social media where we see that kind of an environment and saving our future.
Sir,
we also can see.
Sir, I'll just interrupt you. There is a speaker
sure.
voice is coming. Could you just the repetition of voice is coming?
Okay. Now is it fine?
Yes, now it is fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So these are the images. These are the students of student ASU holding placards for the protest against the environment. So basically, the online media is giving a space. The online media is giving a space to the youth to look at certain issues and of the democracy and to be a part of the democracy. So the area of my presentation will look at these kind of topics that I will be dealing today. The number one is I'll be introducing the topic, and then I'll be looking at various approaches to participation. Thirdly, I'll be looking at online participation and public engagement in the new media environment. Fourth, I'll be. Sir,
I'll just interrupt you again. The PPT is cutting it off. Can you just put it focused?
My voice?
No. The PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
It's just cutting off in the screen. Maybe you can minimize it. Yes, now it is okay.
Okay, let me. Is that fine?
Yes, this is fine now. You can go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so sorry for the technical glitch. So introduction, approaches to participation, online participation and public engagement in the new media environment, participatory methods and digital media to engage the youth, digital media and youth empowerment. Then I will go to the, to make you understand about the online media and the youth in democracy. Then youth and news through participatory channels, and also look at some experiments of India and try to summarize and conclude. So to begin with, to introduce my topic, we all know that with the emergence of new media, the participation of the citizens in the online platform is becoming prominent. And it is also allowing the citizens like us or the youth to produce and disseminate the content easily to a larger audience. So basically the internet or the World Wide Web, what we call it, it's providing a place for information hungry citizens about the events that are happening in the world. It is also offering a cheaper way for the news originators, for the interest groups, also to say the amateur groups or the amateur enthusiasts to deliver it to the prospective consumers. So this kind of a new form of participatory media made the two-way conversation possible between the broadcaster and the publisher, and the reader and the viewer, from that of a lecturer speaking to a passive audience. So a participatory online culture that I'm talking about, because democracy is only about participation. So the participatory online culture is one of the great promises of the new media. And there are early thinkers or the early writers, such as we know, there's a photo on the slide, you can see Howard Ringgold. He's an American. He's almost now 70 years of age, and he has worked extensively on the areas of virtual communities. So he has talked about the whole notion of the virtual public sphere. So the place that we are discussing today, the place that we are having a webinar today, is a part of the virtual public sphere. And also we need to remember one more important person, who is Sherry Turkle. Sherry Turkle has also extensively worked in the field of new media. If I'm sure you would know about Sherry Turkle. She has worked in the areas of extensively on areas of identity and the virtual world of cyberspace. So the scope for the new media to be more participatory arose from its apparent structural differences from the forms of mass communication that had been the predominant models in the 20th century societies. So the concept of participatory media predates the rise of the internet and the network societies, of the network ICTs, and in the sense that the mainstream commercial media have failed to meet certain objectives. So there's a basic question that arises: why does we feel the need of this kind of an online platform? Because the simple reason is we all know that there are certain objectives or the responsibility of the press and their inability to serve as a forum for the exchange of the comment and criticism that actually work as a stimulus to the development of various forms of alternative media. So therefore, I would argue that the rise of interactive media platforms actually made the untrained news professionals directly engage with the news events than ever before. And the relatively low cost of the new media creation technologies also gave an opportunity for any kind of digital media literate citizen from any place of origin to create his or her interactive news media. So this kind of media, basically what I'm calling it is an online participatory media. So it might include the things that we do on a daily basis, like writing a blog, chatting in the chat rooms, or any kind of use of the mobile phones, and so on and so forth. So now the most important part to discuss in my presentation is that there are two approaches to participation. Now, what are the two approaches to participation? The two approaches in the recent years, we have seen that participation has become a common concept that appears in the debates of social sciences and humanities. Although some level of citizen participation is normally understood as something very positive and necessary in the democratic societies, otherwise the discrepancy exists with regard to the level or the intensity of this participation. Different disciplines are debating on issues of the extent of allowing citizen participation, their needs and preferences in their decision-making processes, and perhaps which sectors of society are still unrepresented. So therefore, in the literature of participation, we have seen that including media and participation has produced many different positions. And there are mainly two approaches. As I said in the first, it's called the sociological approach. Now, what is the sociological approach? The sociological approach is that it defines participation as taking part in a particular social process. That means this cast a very wide network. And in this approach, participation includes many types of human interaction in combination with interaction with text and technologies. Now, we cannot say that power is not included here. Power is not at all excluded from this approach, but remains one of the many secondary concepts to support it. So within media studies, sociological approach can be found if we remember how James Carey defined the ritual model of communication. There is a cover of the book, which is a very famous book that we used to refer to when we study communication and culture. It's called the James Carey's Communication as Culture, where he talked about two models, important models called transmission model and the ritual model. So here I would like to bring in the Carey's ritual model of communication, where he explicitly linked these notions of sharing, participation, association, fellowship, and the possession of a common faith. And now if we try to discuss the political approach in this context, and this political approach refers to equalization of the power inequalities in the particular decision-making processes that we do in a day-to-day basis. Also, participation is defined as the equalization of power relations between the people who have and people who do not have, or people who are privileged and people who are non-privileged, actors in any kind of formal or informal decision-making processes. So the political approach also allows emphasizing that participation is an object of struggle, and different ideological projects defend different participatory intensities. Now let us look at what are online participation and public engagement in the new media environment. If we look at the whole idea of the online participation and the civic engagement or the public engagement, we will see that participatory culture is a term that is often used to talk about the apparent link that is between more accessible digital technologies, user-created content, and some kind of shift in the power relations between the media industries and their consumers. Now, another aspect of interactive participatory media that I'm talking now is that it enables any citizen in different countries to converse directly with one another without meeting each other, right? Like the way I don't know, maybe somebody sitting now and watching me, but I am having a conversation with you now, and without the mediating help of the governments or commercial media. So by creating new opportunities for cross-border or citizen-to-citizen communication, or writing blogs, or any kinds of interactive participatory media are seen as a potential vehicle for the cross-border non-governmental activism and citizen diplomacy. So in this new media environment, media is being transformed by new technologies, a transformation that will lead to the loss of control by professionals over news reporting and dissemination of information about events around the world. So therefore, the new media environment is in the process of creating a new model in which the information flows. We also know that online participatory media creates a non-linear and multi-publisher or such group of people, information and opinion goes out to an interactive media site, right? There are bloggers, there are journalists, there are web publishers. So they do sort of writing, they bring information and opinions. So these kind of content that goes into the interactive media site. So this kind of information is consumed by members of the information community, and many of whom react to the original post and add to their own contribution in the form of comments at the bottom of the post. So these are kind of interaction that we have in the online media. Now, when we look at the whole idea of the participatory methods, or so to say, the digital media and how to engage the youth, so we shall try to understand that the role of digital media here is to foster youth civic engagement. That is, that we need support for the youth to use digital media for informed and effective civic engagement, and the benefits and risk of such kind of engagement. Now, to understand for our purpose, digital media include not only the media content that can be shared via the internet. It also includes the digital media practices which are focused on how people use such media. So the youth here shall include, as I said in my early part of my presentation, is the youth here includes the adolescents and the emerging adults. So the civic engagements that I'm talking about also includes a broad range of activities that starts from volunteering, online activism, staying informed, raising awareness of certain issues. So therefore, we shall discuss in my later part of the presentation, I shall discuss the actions to which these individuals or the groups seek to exert their voice and influence on issues of public concern. So therefore, the social media and mobile technology facilitate the rise of this kind of a participatory or online media. Now, if we look at the whole idea of civic engagement and youth development, we need to also understand that for the development of the youth, the participation in the civic life is considered very, very important. I mean, nothing to explain on this matter because everybody understands that. Now, any kind of civic participation that requires civic and political concerns, it requires the identity, it requires academic engagement, it requires any kind of achievement, health and well-being, and so on and so forth. So therefore, the engagement of the youth in such kind of socio-political affairs is associated with certain kinds of self-esteem and well-being. Now, considering the impact of digital media on youth civic engagement, there are researchers that tend to focus not on whether the young people are online, but they are more interested to know what kind of activities they are engaged online. So that becomes more important. What kind of activities, and that also become a part of the research, and what kind of activities that this online group is doing. Another strand of research is focused on online activities that are not explicitly political in nature, but build skills or social ties that support that kind of a civic engagement. So therefore, the social side of a teenager or an adolescent who is using the digital media is often topic of concern for the parents who seek to mitigate exposure to the risk, to the online risk that we talk when it comes to civic engagement. The social ties fostered to social media that also can play a different kind of a role. Now, the youth social network sites use has been found to promote civic engagement. I'll come to this point later, but I'm just hinting it right now. And the use of digital media to create and share the user-generated contents like videos, like poetry, music, has been found to be associated with any kind of political engagement. You know, the rise of the hip hop or the rap or certain kinds of things. The explanation for such findings is that producing and sharing media fosters audience, which builds efficacy and also confidence, collaboration, and deeper engagement with information. Okay, let us look at how are we looking at the whole concept of digital media and youth empowerment. Now, coming to the whole idea of the youth in the communities, which are often defined by risk related to the health, violence, or discrimination, the access to the internet creates opportunity to seek social support. The access to the internet creates opportunities to advocate for themselves. The access to the internet also create opportunities to investigate resources for resilience. So there's a survey that happened in the US. There's not such research happening in India right now. There's a age gap of age limit of 15 to 25 by a group led by Alice Clark and R. Marchi, was talking about the young people and the future of the news, where the social media is seen as a rise of connective journalism. So they have found that and it has been published by the Cambridge University Press in 2017, and it revealed that 41% of the youth were engaged in some kind of a participatory politics. So this suggests that rather than serving as an alternative means of engagement, the use of media to find, share, discuss, and mobilize around certain kind of political issue is a critical part of the repertoire of the modern civic engagement. So the adolescent civic engagement has become an important subject of study because research has established that such involvement promotes positive outcomes, both for the individual development of the adolescents and also for the sustainability of a democratic society. So that's why we need to involve the youth where they can engage themselves to promote certain kind of positive outcome, which will do their development in one hand and also help us to sustain a very important and sustainable democracy. You know, if we remember, you know, there's this slides talks about the change.org, and also there are movements that the Occupy movement, if you remember, where they were talking about stopping the Online Piracy Act and the power of the 6 million users of the change.org that happened in America. So these are certain kinds of examples of the online forum where politics are practiced among the young people. Right? The Obama campaign, if you remember, the use of the social media in 2008 helped to produce record turnout, especially among the young blacks and the Latinos, and this was followed in the subsequent elections in other countries and developing countries, including India. So these are and the interaction of the youth, the new media, and the politics is not exclusively a story from the United States only. But for the recent movements that happened in Tunisia, to Egypt, to Russia, indicate that the significance of the new media's impact on political expression is definitely international in its scope. Now coming to the whole topic of new media and the youth politics that I'm talking from the last couple of minutes, is that it has garnered lots of attention from academicians. It has garnered attention from the politicians, journalists, and these reports often focus on certain kinds of anecdotes or certain kinds of single case examples of the protest mobilization where the new media played a very important role. Now to date, there has been limited opportunity and the data available to explore the relationship between the new media and the political section of the young people in a more comprehensive manner. But you know, we can look at the large proportion of young people across the racial and the ethnic groups in our country, in our region. We can also look at the participatory politics, which are important dimensions of the politics. We can look at participatory politics as the equitably distributed across different racial or ethnic groups or not. So these are certain kind of research areas that we can find out in order to understand the impact of online media on the youth in a participatory or a representative democracy. Now, participatory politics are a significant dimension of the political life of young people, gives them greater control. It gives them greater voice. It gives them potentially influence over the issues that matter most in their lives. So this online platform has the potential to facilitate, I would say, to facilitate an equitable distribution of political participation among the young people from different racial and ethnic groups. So the participatory politics are generally equitably distributed across different racial and ethnic groups, and youth now consume a great amount of news through participation channels. Coming to the whole concept of online media and the youth, which is the primary focus of my presentation, is that the young people's repeated participation in the online space of cultures share certain kinds of expectations about how communication and interaction should happen in other sphere of life, including the political domain. Now, it is also important for us to understand or remember that while new media is seen as central to the participatory politics practiced by the young people, participatory politics can also be practiced offline, right? For example, the New England town meeting or the grassroots organizations, for example, embody these kind of practices. And these are spaces where peer-to-peer exchange of information happens, or the ideas are prized, and there is far less reliance on bureaucratic structures. Now, participatory politics are different than merely taking institutional political activities and moving them online. Now, when it comes to understanding how participatory politics work, the vast networks that form the context for the participatory cultures are of great relevance. So therefore, what is more fundamental to the idea of the participatory politics is that we need to recognize the people as social beings, embedded in the friendship, embedded in the interest, embedded in identity-based networks. And these networks are available for not only sharing information, but also calls for mobilization. The sharing of the skills that help navigate politics, and in some cases facilitate certain kinds of political and civic participation at a reduced cost through certain kinds of technological advancement. Now, these networks that I'm talking about are a component of the social resources that can be mobilized individually or collectively in the political realm to advance our own interest. So in some cases, these networks, it become a temporary political resource when the young people find an issue or campaign that motivates them to act. For example, I'm sure we all have a friend in our lives who tries to mobilize their social network for what they perceive to be a worthy political cause by sending emails or text messages that encourage us to act. I mean, yesterday I've seen many social media posts coming up with a hand with a red talking about menstruation supported by many multinational companies. So for these reasons, we regard the norms, the networks, and the skills that develop in the online friendship and interest-driven context as a kind of digital social capital with the latent capacity for mobilization when a relevant situation definitely arises. Now, there's this particular scholar called Henry Jenkins, you might know. He's also an American. He pointed out certain kinds of important things. He told that we need a space of connection to others where trust is built and deliberation happens. So definitely there should be a trust in the network among the youth, where after that the deliberation happens. So therefore the online context can facilitate social exchange where collective identities can be built or they can be mobilized for civic and political engagement. Now, young people whom I am advocating now or talking about them is that they are most involved in interest-driven activities, who are also much more engaged in political activity. We have seen that. And there are numerous reasons why interest-driven activities facilitate political engagement. Now, individuals who are part of the interest-driven groups that form around shared interest in hobbies, in games, aspects of popular culture, singing, dancing, having a band, for example, often comes from a broader range of political perspectives, skills and experiences that one encounters in one's family or even in one's local community. Now, interaction with a diverse group can expose to a range of opinions and attitudes, stimulating thought, deliberation around issues. Now, in addition to this, the interest-driven groups that I'm talking about are frequently characterized by a participatory culture where the participants become part of that network and that they develop the skills and orientation towards participation that may well advance their own civic and political engagement. So the mobilization of the strong and the weak networks is known to have played a very important critical role, for example, in many social movements that we know, including the civil rights movement. But we want to suggest that, or I want to suggest here that the role and the possibility of the networks in this kind of a digital age is different than the way networks operated in the past. Because it is the ease that we are doing now in terms of social media, of circulating the materials, not only to those we know personally, but to those whom we have never met, right? So, well, in the past, our attempts at outreach through our networks are often bound by physical constraints to those in our temples, our churches, mosques, any kind of religious institutions, common meeting places, classrooms, blogs. But now, whom we see occasionally through email and platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, name it, Tumblr, Twitter, so on and so forth. The participants have the opportunity to engage with, or at least send information to a much larger group of people, right? So the numerous studies have discussed how the race and the ethnicity map in an online digital divide also works. So the various reports explored differences in the rates of ownership of computers. We have to be definitely concerned about the people who do not possess or do not have access to this kind of devices. They're connected to the internet between different groups, believing that the whites were advantaged in ownership and access to the web in the US. Now, the new data have revealed that anxiety about the various or varying rates of ownership and therefore access to the internet between different groups of young people is less needed today than it was different in some time before. So it is something now that with the advancement of technology, with the advancement of proliferation of mobile devices, accessibility to the internet is rare that a young person doesn't have a device. There are cases, definitely, I agree that, but it is little rare. But in this case, it's not the same in terms of developing countries of the global south, where we are still fighting to bridge the gap of the digital divide. Now, given the positive relationship between the interest-driven participation and the institutional and the participatory politics that I'm talking about, findings of what happened with the Blacks and the Latino youth are doing with their increased access to the internet seem to make the matter more complicated now. Now, it seems that some of these young people are using their internet access to engage in interest-driven activities that serve as pathways to political engagement that extend beyond mere entertainment consumption or just wasting the time online. Okay. The next slide. The youth and the news through the participatory channels. In this section, let me talk about some kind of evidence that I have that reading, watching, discussing, and otherwise engaging with the news that concerns societal issues are highly associated with the degree to which one is informed about and participates in the civic life or the political life. Now, therefore, if the youth finds engagement with the news through participatory channels very, very attractive, and if this increases their overall engagement with the news, these practices might foster a positive change in both their overall level of civic and political activity and the quality of that kind of an activity. Now, in addition, some have been concerned that those consuming or circulating and producing the news through the participatory channels may be a part of the echo chambers. Now, when we say echo chambers, it means interact primarily with those who share the same views and may be less likely to encounter divergent views, right? Now, others argue that the opposite, that participatory networks and the norms will actually make it more likely that the individual are more exposed to a range of perspectives. Now, the lack, there are questions that comes to the forefront, that there's a lack of gatekeepers or the vetting of the information that circulates via the web has led to the concern that youth may be getting their information exclusively or primarily through certain kinds of participatory channels. So the vast majority of the youth, the participatory channels supplement their news diet. Now, according to certain kind of studies undertaken, again, by Kathy Cohen and Joseph Cahan of the MacArthur Research Network on Youth and Participatory Politics, 92% of the youth who receive news through a participatory channel in the US also consume news through traditional media outlets. Only 4% of the young people got news through a participatory channel without also using some traditional media. So there is a demand for the traditional media also. This finding may help us allay our fears that youth have replaced the broadcast news with news from the Facebook and Twitter. Moreover, some of the news that comes through participatory channels was originally broadcast and people share the link in the social media, right? And nowadays we do not go to the homepage of any news portal. We just get into the issue, we share the link in the Facebook or the Twitter, and from there we go into into a particular news portal. So indeed, it seems as though participatory channels are supplementing more traditional broadcast sources. Now, youth who consume, youth who circulate, now youth who produce media are exposed to views that diverge from their own at a rate more often than those who do not. So therefore, I would argue here that the exposure to the divergent perspective has been found to foster individuals' knowledge, ability to consider the perspective of others and put forward by others, and tolerance for those with different views. So it's rather than putting into an echo chamber, I think it gives you a more divergent perspective. Now, the most critical point for the youth is that they need support for judging the credibility of the online information. Now, the vast amount of online information that we see every day and the uncertain status of the gatekeepers create many challenges for the youth and the adults alike when it comes to judging the credibility of online information. Although these issues are only beginning to be studied, but we still do not have the credible source. Participatory politics provide a substantial opportunity to reinvigorate both the youth politics and the political life in general. Indeed, youth are using the digital skills and practices that are pervasive in their social life, right? And to broaden their repertoire of political activities. But the strong associations that we saw between non-political, interest-driven activity and participatory politics indicate that the skills, the participatory norms, and the extensive networks that result from these kind of widespread engagement with the new digital media are fostering forms of digital social capital. So therefore, I would say that rather than viewing interest-driven practices as distraction or a waste of time, those seeking to promote youth engagement, be they youth organizations or schools or any kind of NGOs, must recognize their value and potential, because the engagement in the online interest-driven participatory culture may provide a valuable new path through which the youth develop as engaged members of our political community. Okay, now let us quickly look at certain kinds of experiments from this country where we are, trying to look at, this, because, why I'm putting this slide of Youth Ki Awaaz, I will just tell you after a certain point in time. But, the network population of the world as a whole has grown exponentially from 1 million in the 90s to 2 billion in the first decade of the 21st century. And that there's a remarkable pace of adoption of a new technology that is happening everywhere. And we have all been using recent technological innovations. For example, if you remember when CNN introduced the 24/7 news television in 1980s, the power of the live reporting from the battlefield rendered audiences speechless, right? Mesmerized, glued in front of their television screens. But today the web video is everywhere, right? Breaking news is projected into the cyberspace through the Twitter or the Facebook by the random witness turned reporter who uses his or her smartphone and captures the exclusive story. So things are changing, and the Internet and Mobile Association of India, IAMI, says that the number of active internet users in India, latest report is that there are more than 504 million users of the internet in the country. Now, coming to these kind of platforms like Youth Ki Awaaz, where people can share information. This is a platform where I am associated with Radio Brahmaputra in Dibrugarh, where we work with the youth and the adolescents groups. And the youth and the adolescents, they get an opportunity to raise their voice on certain issues of the concerns, make certain programs related to the social issues. One such program is that I have been doing since 2012 with UNICEF. Right now, we do at our own capacity, which is the Children in Media experiments, where the youth talk about their own issues by making videos. And then everybody knows about Gaon Connection, and there are n numbers of other platforms also, but I'm just trying to make you understand that these are the online forums where the youth participate and bring out the other voices through certain kinds of interest groups coming and giving a part to a more deliberative democracy. Before I conclude, I just want to sum up what I just said. In the beginning of my presentation, I said that the scope for the new media to be more participatory arose from its apparent structural differences from the forms of mass communication that has been predominant media models in the 21st century. Then I went to delve about the rise of interactive media platforms, which made the untrained news professionals directly engage with the news events because there is a spark in technology. Third, I talked about the sociological approaches defining participation as taking part in particular social processes. I also spoke about the political approach to participation, which means equalization of power, inequalities in particular decision-making process. Then I dealt with the whole idea of the new media environment where media is being transformed by new technologies, a transformation that will lead to a loss of control by professionals over news reporting and dissemination of information. And then I talked about the term community, where I talked about multi-directional relationship and exchanges where traditional media, within the traditional media, the information flow is linear and unidirectional, where the information goes from original source to journalists, to editors, to publication or broadcast, and then to the audience. But the online participatory media creates a non-linear and a multi-directional information flow. I also talked about the lack of the gatekeepers and the vetting of the information that we need to be concerned about in knowing what the youth is picking up the news and distributing that in the online platforms. I also talked about the online space as a space of participation on the one hand, and also a space for commodification, right? The convergence in both a top-down corporate-driven process and a bottom-up consumer-driven process. So there are organizations in India, as I said, work with these youth, children, adolescents. There are organizations like CG Netswara, who is working on mobile telephony, Gaon Connections, Radio Brahmaputra. There are n numbers of projects that are going on. So this somehow sums up my presentation. I'll be very happy to get comments, feedbacks, and all your. And my email is given. If you do not get time to ask questions now, you may definitely interact over the Facebook and also in the email. So I would like to thank everyone for your patient hearing, and thank you very much for joining this webinar. Thank you. Hi.
So you just said that online media has given a space to the youth to participate in various pressing issues like that of environment. But at the same time, there are young people who are using it in a negative way, means to spread communalism, superstitions, misogynistic content, etc. So how do you see that? And do you see the role of education in this? I mean, more literate people are using it in a more positive way than others.
Okay. The next part of the question is a little tricky for me to answer because sometimes I feel, my engagement with the youth is that, somehow this whole business of civilizing the other, we feel that, they are more civilized than us sometimes, the whole lot, we try to go and train people about certain things. Now coming, Priya, to the first part of your questions about the whole, I think that's a part of the fake news initiative, right? Or the problem that is happening worldwide and also in the country. There are legal and other issues related to that. But what I hinted, Priya, is that what I tried to say is that let us bring interest-driven groups of the youth together. Like, for example, a group who likes to play music in the street and entertain the poor people every Friday or every Sunday. right? And then share that in the YouTube or in the Facebook. So that kind of a group will also have certain kinds of interests, and these kind of same ideological people will also join with that group. So from that group, certain kinds of politics will emanate, and that kind of interest group, if it comes, it will give a better platform for them for a more deliberative democracy. Now, coming to the people, the youth who are trying to do misinformation or throwing out, it is nothing to do about literacy or illiteracy. It is something, a kind of mad mobilization that is happening, that people do not even read the message and forward. We also, as a literate person, sometimes do that. We do not read it and send it across, by ourselves. So I don't think that literacy or illiteracy will do, but yes, value education in the family is something which is important here for the youth, by the institutions, where we need to make them aware about the consequences of the fake news, because the mobile devices are being used as entertainment sources. So they also sometimes forward a message thinking that, it is for fun, and eventually something else happens. So I do not have a direct answer to the next part of the question that you asked, but I think the value education, bringing them together, make them understand the consequence of it, will help them in order to mitigate this kind of a problem.
So many thanks, Alankar. So for your discussion, also we have Professor Sunil Kant Behra with us. He joined with us as the academic advisor of this webinar. I request Professor Behra to put a word to analyze the discussion of Dr. Alankar Kaushik.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Behra, please.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Continue.
Yeah, it is a very nice critical explanation of the online media, a critic's understanding, and I am sure it will largely help the youngsters to understand. It's not only about fake news, but also about how online media can be used very effectively. And you have talked about the deliberative democracy. Now, the deliberative democracy is the result of the online media. If not all, but we can have very effective groups, online groups, who can deliberate on issues which affect the society. So literacy, as somebody was asking whether literacy or illiteracy does matter, but we do talk about media literacy. Once we understand the need of online media, and online media is here to stay, we can't skip that. Like the traditional media, online media is also here to stay in the society. We have to live with that. So as you said, the value education, once we develop certain values, once we believe in certain values which are relevant and beneficial to the society, and once we know our valuable contribution, how it matters for the society, then we will be able to use the online media very effectively. And thank you, Alankar, for this critics viewpoint on online media, youth and democracy. It was nice hearing to you. I was hearing you all through, and it was also, I'm sure, will benefit the youngsters. Thank you, Alankar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Upendra Babu.
Thank you, Professor Behra. Thank you, Dr. Alankar Kaushik. I extend my heartfelt thanks both of you. And I also thank all of our participants who had joined with us, who had suggested number of things during chat of the webinar. So I thank all the participants along with the research person and our advisor. And right now we'll wind up this first day of the third series of the webinar over here. Again, I welcome all the participants for our tomorrow program. So tomorrow at sharp at 11, we all will join in the second day of the third series of webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.